Because this is where I was based in England. This is my first mission to St. Valerie, my second mission to Leipzig, and then these are my 35 missions total. Berlin, Rouen twice, Würzburg twice, Regensburg, Stuttgart, Schweinfurt, Dusseldorf, Wetzlar, Bielefeld, Bremen.
The following is presented with limited editing. Those interviewed are witnesses to history and deserve to have their stories heard in their entirety.
So what are you guys doing on your downtime whenever you're
Well, I went to school sometimes. They were teaching us more with the bombardiers or with the navigators or getting other instructions. I must have seen every movie ever made. We went to movies every night, or the officers' club. We'd shoot craps for 2 or 3 days of the first of the month, and then all the money was one person or whatever we lost what we're going to, and then that was it for the month. So you're either broke or you're rich. So, but I don't remember doing much except going to movies, and we'd go into town. Got into London maybe every 3 weeks or so. Went into London after the 8th of June we went into London.
Was London pretty tore up?
Yes, it was.
Can you describe that to me?
How do you describe ruins? I mean, here were these burned out buildings, and it was black out at night. You couldn't see anything, and the cars had little dim lights on them, and it was just ruins all over the place. The German Luftwaffe bombed London, and when I was there, they'd won the Battle of Britain, the British had, but they're sending the buzz bombs over, which are very destructive and indiscriminate, where they'd go until they'd run out of gas, and then they'd go on down and explode when they hit the ground. And then later on, the V2s came in, which are rockets, and you wouldn't hear them till after they hit. So sometimes we'd go to Oxford or Cambridge instead. We were afraid to go to London. But the first time in London, I stayed at the Savoy, which is the premier hotel in London, for £2, which was about $10 in those days. And I remember at the base, we only had hot water, cold water. There was no in between. And got in the shower in the Savoy and had warm, and just stood there and had these big bath sheets to dry off. And I spent 2 nights there. After that, went to the Red Cross clubs for 50 cents a night.
Oh man. So after Operation Cobra, what was the next step after that?
It was the 25th and the 28th and 9th. I flew missions to Merseburg oil refineries. That's where we lost one of our squadrons right there. And then on the 31st of July, we were over at Munich at 27,000 feet, and a burst of flak hit right under us, about 10 seconds after we released the bombs. And a piece of flak knocked out 2 engines, one on each side, and a piece of flak came through the bottom of the plane. The pilot sat on an armored seat, maybe a 1/4 inch thick, went through that, went through the co-pilot's left thigh way up here and out the roof. And we found out later we had about 70 holes in the airplane. But we're in the flak, so I was a medical officer on the crew, so I went, gave him a shot of morphine, sprinkled sulfa on his wound. And at 27,000 feet, we're about 40 degrees below zero. So as blood came out, it froze, so he could not lose more blood. But we couldn't keep with the formation, and we're out of flak area and getting hit by fighters were attacking us. So we screamed Mayday for P-51s. They came and drove them off. But we're losing altitude on 2 engines, so we threw out everything we could once the fighter attack was over to lighten the load, so we tried to get back to England. We tried to go into Switzerland, which is right there by Munich, and it was fogged down to the ground. So we had to go back. But the lower altitude, he started bleeding again. So for the last 3.5 hours, I just kept pressure on the wound to keep from bleeding. It was too high to put a tourniquet on. And he survived. He had he was in the hospital 4 years and had 22 operations, but he survived and walked with a limp, but he survived. He's the only one of our crew that was ever wounded. That was our 25th mission. We flew 3 more as a crew with another co-pilot. And after we got back from rest home, after Munich, the rest home, flak house, you lived like a civilian for a week. We got civilian clothes, played tennis, rode bicycles, went into the town to dance. We even got tomato juice in bed. But anyway, we're back at the barracks in the Quonset hut, and we're messing around. We're flipping gun patches loaded with lighter fluid and flipping matches at the same time, trying to hit the other guy. And our pilot went back to ward off one of those, and he cut his hand severely. So we couldn't fly for 2 weeks. So we flew 3 more missions together. One is to Ruhlenbach near Berlin, one to Brest, and I don't know where the other one was. And they broke up our crew. The bombardiers and navigator had to stay. I guess I don't know whether we getting more wounded or getting their missions finished, but they broke up our crew, and that flew as a replacement for the last 7 missions.
Is there anything that you can remember or tell me about like the individuals in your crew, like their personalities or any stories you recall?
Well, the officers, even though you're flying together, living and dying together, we knew the enlisted men, but not as well. The officers, because we were in the officers club and our bunked together and all. So we were separate most of the times except we're on the flight. So our crew, 4 of the gunners were only 19. The other one was 24, the other one 25. Our pilot was only 22 and the co-pilot was just 20. And there was this 4-engine bomber they're flying. I was 22 at the time and our navigator was 25. So no, the only thing I remember, the co-pilot thought he was a better pilot than the pilot. He didn't have a chance to prove it, and I've never asked him, how do you become a co-pilot instead of a pilot? I don't know how they set him up that way. I know some of the pilots that washed out became glider pilots on D-Day.
So after your first 27, 28, you flew as a replacement?
Yes.
Okay.
I flew 25 missions in 2 months and took me 10. I had 2 months, I had the last 8. But I flew to the mines, which is railroad junction. I flew to Bielefeld. I flew to Stuttgart again, back to Ruhlen again, and Magdeburg. So then on my 34th mission, target was Berlin. Every mission I knew I was going to die. And on this mission, for sure, because it was a heavily defended city in all of Europe. They had 1,600 anti-aircraft guns shooting at you. Our target was a tank track right in the middle of Berlin. But normally after I dropped the bombs, the navigator, I get back to back, we had metal flak suits on to give us better protection. And this day I stayed right out in the plexiglass nose, knowing I was going to die and watch the bombs go all the way down. And we did lose 17 planes that day out of the Air Force, and more than 200 of them were damaged out of the 400 that were sent. But I survived. Then my 35th mission, I flew as a navigator to mines again, the railroad junction. So I wrote a letter home, glad it's over. Maybe tonight I'll get a good night's sleep knowing I don't get shot at tomorrow. And I have an article in there about the 8th Air Force suffering the highest casualty rate of all the armed forces, with 26,000 airmen were killed, another 18,000 wounded, and 21,000 were prisoners of war. So it was tough. I was lucky to survive, about 80% casualty rate at the time. And when it's 25 mission was 80%, 35 is still 80%. So the ones earlier had it just as tough as we did. So
you mentioned, every mission, you were pretty confident that you weren't going to make it.
yes.
How do you deal with the stress and the fear of being in combat?
I don't know. I've always wondered myself. I don't remember. I think I just went about my business and didn't dream about it, dwell on it. And this is where I know when we walked in the Quonset hut, happy you're home, and after the briefing. Then you walk in, you'd see 4 empty bunks there. They're friends you had breakfast with 10 hours before. They were coming back. I don't know. I was paired with a naval aviator, Blue Angel, from the Vietnam War on HEC TV one time, talking to 4 high schools around the country. And his attitude, boy, in the morning he wake up, he wants to get in that plane and go strafe this bridge and bomb that, whatever he's doing. That's for the red flare, so we don't go. There's a 100% different attitude than fighter pilots against me. I don't know the rest of the crew, but we're all there.
Did you ever see anybody, like, where the stress got to them?
Our tail gunner did. He quit along the way after about 15 or 16 missions. He refused to fly. They didn't do anything for him. After about a month, he was still on the base and he's going back flying. I said, "You're crazy. They grounded you. Stay grounded. Why do you want to go back and finish?" But he did. But he's the only one. I had a friend that was bombardier in Italy, and he flew about 15 or 16 missions, and I never asked him why, but I heard they thought he was a black sheep or something, and everything happened when he was on a plane, and no one would fly with him. I never asked him, but that's the rumors I heard, so I don't know.
Were a lot of people superstitious?
The only superstition I had, I'm Jewish, and then before the war, I'd go to temple a couple of times a year. But over in England, every Friday night, I went to services, and whoever's going to help me, I'm going to take every chance I get to all the help I can get. So that's the only, I had no rabbit foot or anything. That was the only thing, the superstition I think I had. Oh, that I asked not to fly on this 27th of September, Yom Kippur, the holiest day in the Jewish calendar. And they came in at 2 o'clock and woke me and said, "You're scheduled to fly." I said, "No, I'm not." And they said, "Yes, you are." So I was getting toward the end of my missions anyway. This was about my 30th mission, so I flew. I did a little extra praying that day, and but anyway, it helped, I guess. Here I am.
With being Jewish, was there any added concern for you as far as like maybe getting shot down and taken prisoner?
Yes. The co-pilot and I were both Jewish, and we talked about it, whether they're going to throw our dog tags away or not. And some of my Jewish friends didn't have the J or the H on their dog tag, a P for Protestant or whatever it was. And we talked about it. It depended on who captured you, what the consequences were. If the German army captured you, you were safe. I mean, everybody, Jewish or otherwise. But if the civilians or the Gestapo or the SS got you, sometimes you were killed, not because you're Jewish, just because you were bombing their cities. So I don't know. I had friends that were POWs, and they didn't treat like all the other POWs. So.
And they were Jewish?
Yeah.
Really?
I have friends that Battle of the Bulge, one was captured there, another was shot down, Navigator, and friends of the Navy. We never talked about the war, never. As I said, there's my best friend was a bombardier, and I ever asked him about what was going on in Italy. Until I got this French Legion of Honor, that's when I started talking about it.
Why do you think that is?
Oh no, we just came back and went about our business, that's all. And we had done a job, and I think we were just happy. I was one of 16 million, and it took all of us to do the job. Even to get us off the ground, we needed the people putting the bombs in the plane, putting gasoline in the plane, the parachute packers, the weather people, the medics to take care of us, truck drivers to bring us there, cooks and bakers to keep us fed. Everybody involved, couldn't do it without them.
There was one story that you told at Fort Leonard Wood. I'm pretty sure it was you. About showing up in England the first night and some guys were playing some sort of game.
Well, we were in a Quonset hut the first night. The Quonset hut, a round cabin, held 10 officers. There were 2 air crews, 4 each, and then we had a medic and a weatherman. And the other crew had flown 22 missions. They were flak happy. I mean, now it's PTSD, but in World War I it was shell shock. But anyway, they were flak happy, and they were 3 shots were fired, live rounds out of their 45, shooting close to each other, seeing how close they could come without hitting each other. I just turned my back against the wall and hoped I survived the first night. I mean, that's what we're doing after our 8th mission, where the pilot hurt his hand. Just been doing crazy stuff. It was just normal activity as far as we're concerned, but it was crazy. The reason I mentioned we didn't fly 2 weeks, and the reason extra 2 days in Labrador, and I had the measles after I got out of pilot school. I was in the hospital for a week before I went back to Nashville. For 75 years, I wonder, what if I hadn't flunked out of pilot school before my friends were killed out of the 6. What happened if we'd not had the extra 2 days in Labrador? Would we be in a different group? We didn't fly for 2 weeks. What would happen if we had been flying? But it worked out. But I've always said, what if all these years, all these delays and getting washed out, it survived. Nothing happened. But I just wondered if these delays hadn't happened, what would happen. My pilot class graduated in June of 1943. So they were all overseas. Well, I showed you those 2 letters that were returned. Those are my 2 good friends. One was deceased, the other marked missing, and he's buried in the Philippines.
So, after you got back, what did you do after the war? Or wait, you took on a different job though first.
I was afraid to come home because they were retraining us for B-29 bombing over Japan. And I'd been shot at enough. I didn't want any more of that. So there was an opening for a awards officer. So I applied for the group awards officer in October. I finished my last mission October 9th, 1944, and took this job and stayed there. And a letter came down. And in the board's office, we kept track of every mission for every man, and all the hours in the air, what he did. And there were about 20 people in the office. But anyway, in March of 45, a letter came down. If you were with the group when the war ended, the year was getting pretty well. They knew it was going to end pretty soon. You had to stay with the group until the war was over. And I didn't know what that meant. So I asked to come home, which I was in S1, so I was able to ask them home, and they granted it. So I came back home, and then I went to Bombardier Instructor School, Midland, Texas, for about 6 weeks, and then I was in Big Spring, Texas, teaching French cadets how to bomb when the war ended. And when VE Day came along, the end of Europe, we didn't celebrate. We were still fighting, But when VEJ Day came along, as I said, I was Big Springs, Texas, and everybody had a bottle walking down the street. This guy with a bourbon, this scotch, this gin, no telling what. And taking a sip out of everybody. The whole town was drunk. I had to get my roommate that passed out, had to get a cab and to take him back to barracks and throw him in the shower to sober him up. But anyway, the wars ended, and then the war actually ended September 2nd, and I was back at Jefferson Barracks on the 12th of September, being discharged. So officially, October 20th, because I had leave and whatever. So I was in for 3 years, 3 months, and 14 days in the Army Air Corps. Afterwards, I took a test that the St. Louis Chamber of Commerce gave for returning veterans, so business would know who to hire, what their qualifications were. And I got a job offer, $35 a week from a paper company. It was better than the $22 I was making when I went in. But I saw the sales manager at Rice Sticks where I worked before. I had no intention going back. I was just a clerk. And he said, come talk to him. So I talked to him. And when in service, my only desire was to buy a car when I got out. Well, I went and talked to him. He said, we'd like to put you on the road selling at $175 a month and 5% commission, and we'll provide a car. So there's no choice. I mean, the money was better than the other and the car. So I worked there 2 years, and then left them and worked with my father, who was in the dress manufacturing business, and they liquidated in 1950. So then I just independent rep after that, selling children's clothing, traveling Missouri, Illinois, and Kansas for the next 40 years. I was all set in 1948, and you still couldn't get a car. I was set to buy a Frazier, and one of my friends called and said he could get me a Nash. So I bought a Nash in 1948, and I drove Nashes for about 10 years. They had big trunks. Most people look under the hood when they're looking at a car. I looked at the trunk, see if I had room for my samples. So anyway, I traveled to Missouri, Southern Illinois, and Kansas for the next 40-some years, calling retail stores, big and little ones, and selling children's clothing.
Do you remember the day that you came home and saw your family again?
Not really.
Yeah.
I know I was dismissed at Jefferson Barracks, and I took a streetcar downtown and caught a bus home. But my mother tells me on my letter that came on the 20th, after my 35th mission, everybody in the neighborhood knew I was flying, or they knew what everybody was doing. And the mail generally came about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And this day, the mailman came at 9 o'clock in the morning to give my mother the mail that I'd finished my 35th mission. But other than that, I don't know, just went back to what I was doing.
Okay.
My girlfriend got married while I was gone, so I got a Dear John letter. And we've been going together a couple of years, I guess, before I went in service, maybe more than that.
Man. That happened quite a bit, didn't it? That kind of stuff happened quite a bit, didn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the men who were around and who were around, I won't say took advantage of the women, but they had the choice maybe, I don't know. No, she's the only one I know. I guess my sister got married too during the war. My brother-in-law didn't serve, so he was older.
Okay. This will probably be my last question, but this is a question about leadership, I guess. With the different leaders that you had, or superiors that you had while you were in the service, what were some things that you think made for a good leader? Like what defines good leadership?
Someone they want to follow, that they knew they were doing the right thing, Uh, we had no, I think we had 3 or 4 of our group commanders were shot down when I was flying. We had them, I think the whole time they were there from February '44 until the war ended a year later, a year and 3 months. They had 9 different commanders. But some were promoted and some, I think 4 or 5 were shot down. But it's what's a good leader? I don't know. One of my letters, I talked about going up to headquarters with another lieutenant, and we're complaining about something. They want to know what our thoughts were. I know they're complaining, or we just want to know what our morale was. I don't know. But there were a couple of generals and a couple of colonels there I know. But in the air, we just made sure we were close together. That was a good leader, keeps your squadrons and the group close together. And so.
Are there any of the missions that stand out to you above the others as being the most difficult?
Well, the one to Nuremberg was when we lost 2 engines on the way 100 miles west of the Rhine going to Nuremberg. We hit by flak about 100 miles west of the Rhine, and our orders were we could not drop bombs west of the Rhine because Patton was on the move. We didn't know where he was. And so we had to fly on 2 engines across the Rhine. I dropped 3 bombs on a red brick building and turned around and headed back and dropped 3 more bombs. But that's the only one that's really stands out, except the Berlin one. But Munich was the worst, and Russia was the most interesting. But it was war.